we have different tribes with different values, some more individualist, some more collectivist, some pray to these gods, some pray to those gods, different ideas about things like gay marriage or abortion or whatever it is. How can we all get along? Well, I'll tell you, I don't think there's a magic bullet solution. But I do think there's a way of thinking about these things that is better than what we currently do. And I think that the people who originally got this right were Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill in the late 18th and 19th century. So what was their idea? So they were, first of all, Mill and Bentham were kind of amazing. They were way ahead on almost every major social issue of their day. They were among the first opponents of slavery, among the first proponents of free markets, workers' rights, what we now call women's rights, all of that stuff. They were way ahead. How did they get so far ahead? Well, I have a psychological hypothesis, but let me put this in more abstract philosophical terms first. So they began with two basic questions. So one is, who really matters? And the other is, what really matters? So the who really matters, their answer is essentially the golden rule. That is, everybody's interest counts equally. Now, this is a very untribal thing to think. What you normally think is, well, I, myself, my people, we count more, and those people over there count less. But if you try to think of what would a global meta-morality look like, that is, trying to have a moral system that adjudicates among competing tribal values in the same way that ordinary morality adjudicates among competing individual interests, this meta-morality, it's going to have to be impartial. So that's one. And then the other part of it, and this is the more controversial part, is I said, what really matters, our real common currency, is our human experience, our capacity to be happy, our capacity to suffer. And what they said is that if you think about all of the things that you value and ask, why do I care about that? And then say, and why do I care about that? And why do I care about that? Until you run out of answers. They say it all ultimately comes down to the quality of your experience. So if you say, well, why does it matter to be honest? Well, when you're dishonest, it hurts people. Well, what do you mean it hurts people? They lose money or something like that? Oh, well, they lose money. Well, why is it bad if people lose money? Well, then they can't have what they need to support themselves. Well, why do they need it? You go on and on, and ultimately it comes down to somebody's well-being in the experience sense of avoiding their happiness or avoiding their suffering or promoting their happiness. Now, that's highly controversial, but that's at least a plausible idea. And so you put this idea together and you say, well, happiness, suffering, experience, that's the value behind our other values. That's how they all cash out. And if we're going to have some kind of universal moral system, it's going to have to be impartial. And so they said, well, we should try to maximize happiness in an impartial way. Now, most philosophers today think this is a terrible idea because there have been tons of counterexamples, intuitive counterexamples. I gave you one, the footbridge case. It seems wrong to kill that guy in order to save those extra lives, right? Hold that thought and just join me in just thinking about this in the abstract. I think it was this more abstract thinking that enabled them to make wonderful progress. And a particularly striking example of this comes from Jeremy Bentham, who in around 1785 penned one of the first defenses of what we now call gay rights. Now, some of you may be, the current issue here is gay marriage here in the United States at this time. Some of you are for, some of you here may be against. But in Bentham's time, not only was gay marriage not legal, gay sex was punishable by death. And I'm assuming that most of you think that that's not okay. But at the time, everybody thought that was okay, except for Bentham. So how did he get to this crazy idea? Well, he had this moral framework. He had done a lot of thinking about morality and came to the conclusion that the quality of experience is what ultimately matters, and that we should be looking at the quality of experience from an impartial perspective. And he said to himself, I've been trying for years to figure out how to justify the rules that we have against being gay. And I can't do it. So maybe it's actually not so bad. And with that crazy thought, crazy at the time, he leapt ahead 2 centuries in moral thinking. That's manual mode. That's thinking slow, right? He had the same gut reactions as everybody else, but he didn't take them too seriously, or he took them seriously, but he didn't give them veto power, so to speak, over his own moral thought.